And one of their basic human experiences is that rivers do not flow backwards. That's a very common experience. I think this is even in Japan true, probably. But this river flows backwards. So 2 months of the year in Maun, you see the river coming from from west to east, and then it fills a small lake. So you see the riverbed, and you see the water, it's full of water, and it runs from west to east. When there is no rain coming from Angola, when there is no water following, it stops, and then the water from this small lake runs back into the same riverbed, and then it's from east to west. So you stay there, the same place, and the river flows backwards. And there is also a cylinder spillway, which works the same way. So there are things which are completely different to our expectations. And the third, I don't know whether you remember, but the third is that we have the same communicative needs. And just looking at this picture, you can see that these people do have quite different communicative needs to Japanese people in Tokyo or Germans in Cologne. I mean, the situation is very different, and they talk about very different things. That's something which I find very useful for the small-scale communities or societies of intimates. That's from Givon. So they have a shared knowledge, and the communication is face-to-face. So these are just some pictures of Kwe I'm working with, just to give you a short idea on that. I don't know why it's so slow. And finally, I'm coming to what we as linguists deal with at the languages. So there is a high polysemic occurrence, so expressions with different but related meanings and only one linguistic form. And, I'm already pushed. And we tend to analyze. So I'm talking about concepts, and this is an example which shows how fast concepts change and situations change, and sources might not be visible anymore. You see this young boy, he's working the bellows. So this young boy on the right, he's working the bellows. They're blacksmith activities. So there are he's heating up this, he's increasing the heat by using the bellows. So the movement is like this. So he makes like this. And this term, so in 1957, the first car entered this part of Africa. So that was the first car the Kwe people saw. And driving a car is kuru. And this activity is kuru. So this movement is kuru. And when you ask young people, because now the roads are different, there is a tar road, and at that time there was no tar road. So when you ask young people, they don't know why the old people called this kuru, and now kuru is the term to drive a car. But obviously in old times they had no power steering, and the people saw just the hands, with the huge steer wheel coming up like this. So it was the same movement, and since it changed, it's not visible anymore. So that's how fast things change. Another change of concept can be dated between 1970 and 80. So God changed gender. So before that it was female, and now it's male, and it's consistent. So old people still use their feminine suffix he, and young always ma. And when you work with young people translating texts from old, they will always correct, because for them it's an insult, to use the feminine suffix. So they will always translate a male version. And when I asked a young woman why her grandfather, why her father is using Kianihe. She said maybe he speaks of Maria. No? I mean, for her to imagine that there used to be a female god, it was just out of everything. I mean, impossible to follow. Then, okay, I'm leaving these things which are that. Okay, so here you see the Dao means footprint, trail, path, more recently road and highway. So it means footprint, from footprint up to highway, everything. And when you speak to older people, they will still associate Dao with the footprint, or the young one will translate, they have the image of the highway. So conceptual change is something very important, and it might happen quite rapidly. So these are just the roads which illustrate what Dao is. So this is the Tao road. Then in our translations, we have to be very careful that we might influence our translations by these global concepts and categories, and we may even cause shifts. And an example which I did, so I'm responsible actually for some que using this term now also for edible animal, because I was insisting that this could also be meaning edible animal. But the real meaning is kroho means meat. But since there is no term for animal, I pushed them into something like edible animal. So I asked, is this thing also kroho? And they said yes. And then I translated edible animal, but it's meat. And the idea of edible animal is because I pushed them into that. You know? So it's I discovered that many of the informants of these old friends of mine, which I used in the beginning to work as consultant with me, they're pretty useless now because they follow my ideas, you know. So they adapted, and this is something which is very dangerous, I think. So this is already the end. So for the handbook, I think that in documenting concepts, we must reflect the impact of our own concepts on categories, on documenting. Then also the meaning assigned by the speakers themselves in these fieldwork situations are influenced by our presence and our kind of questions. And then the last is that we should document concepts in natural conversations and internal usage patterns. So they shouldn't be asked independently. And this is, I want to end here to have enough time to sort of relate this to Uchinaguchi in questions maybe you'll address to me.